I'm Nick Terzo, and you are listening to The Radical. This week's guest hails from the Tobique First Nation within the parameters of New Brunswick, Canada. It took many years of research to create his debut record, honoring his nearly lost native language. Not only is he a classically trained musician, but also an anthropologist and a musicologist. His record, Wolas Tuwik Lintu Wagon Awa, won both a Polaris Prize and a Juno Award. Jeremy Dutcher joins me to discuss his anthropology work, language, preservation of culture and rituals, and transforming an ancient language into contemporary music. Coming up, my conversation with Jeremy Dutcher. Hi, Jeremy. Thanks for doing the show.
So happy to be here, Nick. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to speak to you. You have a fascinating history, and you made a fascinating debut record. We can talk about whether there's a follow-up coming. I want to know what you've been doing, if there's something to follow this up soon. It was critically well received, to say the least.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get into that a little bit. But I do want to talk about like the journey. I mean, this took many years for you kind of to create your first record, right?
Yeah, no, for real. Like, I think the music industry works at a really frenetic pace a lot of the time, you know? And so it's like, you know, when's your next single? Like, you know, the year album cycle, you know, it's like, I didn't pay attention to any of that. Because like when I started doing the work that led to the album, it wasn't even an album. It was strictly just a research project that I was doing as a musicologist at a university here in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. And from that, doing that research, which was like looking at the traditional field recordings of my ancestors, the Wolastoqiyik, through hearing those recordings, it really set me on a different path, you know, because, yeah, and if you listen to the record too, you can hear them as well, because I play along with them. And so when you hear those recordings, I think, even if you're not coming from that community or you don't understand the language, you understand that there's an intrinsic beauty within those voices, and it's a real snapshot of a moment in history. You know, these are recordings coming from the early 1900s, so from 1907 to 1911. These were.
Who recorded these?
So this is an anthropologist named William H. Meschling, and he went around and he actually lived among my people for 7 years. And was like, and that's the thing, you know, when I started to sit in this museum, it wasn't just about the songs, right? Like there was a huge collection of, and this is very early recording technology days too. So this is before they had records, before, you know, 8-track, any of that shit, right? Like,
cylinders, right?
Like wax cylinders, right? And so these are some of the very first early recording technologies. In fact, those cylinders that our songs were recorded on, they still say Edison along the top, you know, because he invented the, you know, so it's like, it's really proto recording technology. And it's so amazing that it just happens to be my ancestors. And so when I started to dig into that, right. So what I was saying too, he was there for 7 years, and he wasn't just collecting songs, but he was also collecting photographs and stories and, you know, historical accounts and all of these really important narratives. So as I get to sit down at that museum, and I spent a couple of weeks there, really digging through the breadth of everything that was in there, you felt immediately a sense of responsibility, right? Because, you know, as you know, somebody who was coming with a university education, access to a lot of privilege, and ability to navigate those spaces that not like a lot of Indigenous people don't have, you know? And so for me, it was a responsibility to leverage that relationship to power in that space and create a more accessible way for our people to engage this material, right? Because that was the whole problem for me, was when I heard about these recordings, it was the first, like, I wasn't young when I heard about them. Like I was in my 20s and I was like, what? Like that exists? Like, cool. Okay. I got to go to the museum. I got to check it out. But the fact that, I had to wait until I was that old to understand that there's this huge depository or repository of knowledge that is sitting there that was left for us by our ancestors. That for me was the issue in itself, was the fact that they weren't accessible. So for me,
what did they encompass, Jeremy? Like what was that an interview thing? Was it the rituals? Was it?
Yeah, it was kind of a little bit of everything. It was kind of, I always say like the intentions for the recording were a little bit backwards, but I'm glad they exist, But the whole idea around the turn of the century was that because of genocide, that indigenous people and their culture was dying out. And that this was the last generation in which we would have true, authentic, whatever that means, indigenous culture. And so it was on the responsibility of the institutions of knowledge, the universities, to go and preserve and protect that knowledge, with the thought that we wouldn't be able to do that ourselves, right? Based on societal factors, based on the projects of assimilation that were happening across Turtle Island, across the continent. So yeah, I like, it was a bit of a paternalistic endeavor. I guess the whole discipline of anthropology is a little bit like that. The looking outward onto others. And so I guess what I had hoped to do was breathe a little bit of autoethnography into that archive and really be like, okay, but like what, as a contemporary indigenous person, what do I have to say to that archive? Like let's take the power structure of the museum out of the equation. Let's take the anthropologist out of the equation. So I actually don't, in my interviews, I don't usually even bring him up, because for me, he was a tool of the preservation of my songs. And so I think more about that ancestor, and we know their names, like their names are on the recording. So, I've sort of built this like kind of funny relationship with my ancestors, where I can hear their voices, I hear the songs that they sing and the stories that they tell, but I'll never meet them. And I wonder sometimes when 120 years ago, whenever this anthropologist brings his big sound recording equipment to the reserve and says, hey, sing me your songs. And I think about like that ancestor of mine when they leaned forward and sang into that, like, who did they think they were singing to? Like, did they know it was me? Like,
right.
There's no way. I don't think they could have thought that, 100 years later that this, little university nerd is going to come and start to dig around in your archive. But, again, this is strictly the direction of my elder from, and I always love to talk about this piece of it too, because I think it's really important to talk about mentorship and the sort of intergenerational relationships when it comes to music making. Because yeah, I guess being studied in a classical music setting, I didn't really feel that same sense of mentorship and that same sense of openness to helping each other and lifting each other up. That world comes, and I think it has to do with class too, but it comes with a lot of values that are kind of, as an Indigenous person, are foreign to me, And so, yeah, I guess for me, the whole reason why I wanted to create music that spoke to me as an Indigenous person was because I didn't see myself reflected in the mainstream sort of, I was studying as an opera singer at the time. And I thought, well, this is even when they talk about us, it has nothing to do with us, because it's all just, and because I'd like to talk to Americans about this too, because every media portrayal that they think they know about Indigenous people is a fallacy. It's all a construction of what somebody else thinks Native people do act like and say, like, with a few notable exceptions. And I think now more and more so, we're starting to get into the writing rooms, into the decision-making spaces. And I think, that's really what's going to change things, because when we can start to bring our own narrative forward, then we can actually start to have a relationship for the first time, like non-Indigenous people and Indigenous people, because I think that pathway hasn't been cleared because there's been that paternalism, that top down, but also that sense of yeah, I guess just and through that we've come to not value our own stories, and so I hope with my work I can kind of flip that and encourage Indigenous people to look deeper into our ways and deeper into the history and into because what I came to understand too is it's not just that archive, that museum is not just our own material. Like it's not just Wooloostook, like my particular small little nation in Canada, but it's like everybody's nation. Like they did this for every nation. Every community has archive. And so I just think it's like, for me, I knew how much it brought to my life and my understanding of my culture and my language and all this stuff. So I'm just trying to go out and proselytize, I guess, and tell other young Indigenous people, we got to go back because there's like, there's a way that the old people live, and an understanding that they have through our languages. And two, I think language is a really important piece of this. Sorry, I'm really talking a lot. I'm just gonna.
No, I guess this is fascinating to me. Yeah. What is the language though? What is the name of the language?
Yeah, so I'll break it down for you a little bit. So me and my family, we come from a river basin. So there's like it comes down and like a valley into a river, and that river is called Wooloostook. And so we call ourselves the people of the beautiful river. And so that is Wooloostook-Iig. So Wooloostook-Iig is the people of the beautiful river. Now, the language that we speak is the language of that river. So we say Wooloostookwe. So Wooloostookwe is the language of the river, but that's also our language too. So, yeah.
I mean, you're talking about like New Brunswick, right? You're kind of east of Maine. Is that
where you were located? Because of course, like we did not cross the borders crossed us. And right. So like there's a tribe in Maine called the Passamaquoddy, or in our language we just say Beskadamogati, and those are the ones just in kind of like the northeastern part of Maine, just right on that border. And so we speak the same language, we have all the same customs, literally it's the same, we're the same people. And yet because of the border, we've been divided and now we are separated. And, there's a sense of, and two, just because of the different like governments that we are, being, cared for by, we have very different experiences as people, and but mostly our nation is here in New Brunswick, but also in Quebec as well. And so that's the thing, when we start to talk about Indigenous territories, just to like define it to one province or one state, or it's just like all of these lines were just drawn at some point by some person who actually doesn't even know the the landscape, right? So
right.
It's like I see our solidarities as extending much further than the American border or provincial borders or state borders. When we start to think about our nations, as they were before the arrival of Europeans, that for me it defines us in a much more clear way, in a way that makes more sense, because I guess just those because we have been here for so long as Indigenous people, the lines that we have drawn, or the spaces in which, those are the middle lands, or that's the border, like the mountains of the border. It's like, this makes sense. It's like you went on a map and drew a straight line through like water systems, and that doesn't make sense. So anyway, I don't know. I'm not trying to redraw any borders here, but I will say, like, as an Indigenous person, like we see that those borders are really new in the grand scheme of things. It's a really new concept. So,
so while you're doing this, I mean, look, what sparks you to say, listen, I am an anthropologist, I'm a musicologist, I'm a classically trained musician. Yeah. I got to do something here. Like what? Well, how did that turn into like where did all these ideas join for you to make a record?
I know it sounds like it's so obvious that it would just be the pathway. Like all of these things kind of coming together to just be like, yeah, obviously you have to do that. It's like, you did the research, you have the.
It's not obvious to me.
I know, right? Yeah. But and that's the thing. Like for me, it's so unmagnificent just because it's my own pathway. This is like, everything I've done thus far has just led me to be able to take a stage and to talk about our stories, in a way, right? And I think what's different right now about this moment, what I always say is like, what I'm doing right now, the ability to go out there and to share our language and culture and songs with non-Indigenous people, was not even possible one generation ago, right? It's like there was not an appetite. And just a little bit, I know it's different in the States, but in Canada here, up until 1952, it was illegal for us to go and to share songs. So this is like, it's very recent history that it's just kind of like starting to become okay for us to like come out and start to share these stories. So there's a reason why we haven't heard from Native people, right? And, we wonder why that is, right? So we think about how states like Canada, like America, are designed on top of existing places, right? And so that settler colonial mindset has to unimagine an existence of a people.
It's done it very well. It's excelled at it.
Right, exactly. And it's like, it's written the textbook on it. And we look at like apartheid that was created, and very much the Nazi regime looked to North America and said, hey, those folks are doing really good at that whole genocide thing. Maybe we should take a look. Sorry, not to make a joke about it, but it's like,
right.
It's like we must acknowledge that these are the roots of our society, and that we've built these beautiful ideas of countries. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I believe in those ideas of pluralism and democracy. This is all beautiful, but it's not something unique to here. And it's not something that only lives here. And often, when we look at the American Constitution, we understand that is really, really influenced by the Iroquois Confederacy, and the fact that those different branches of government, anyway. So it's like, for somebody like Rick Santorum to go on TV and say that the contribution of Indigenous people to the American way of life is like, it's laughable. It's just, anyway, it's just, you have to laugh to stop from the anger and the tears of trying to advocate for just your existence in the only place that your people have ever known as a homeland, right? And right. Even from a linguistic standpoint, like I'm living now in Montreal, Quebec, where the first language is French, and I come from the East Coast, where first language is English, but neither of those languages are Wolastoqey, right? And both of those languages are spoken everywhere around the world. It's like, and two here in Quebec, because it's a smaller language group than English in Canada, there's this hierarchy that's like, then Quebec feels threatened. Like, oh, we have to protect our language, but it's like, French will be fine. French there's a whole country of people that speak it over there. Actually, have you been to Africa? Like, pretty much the whole continent speaks French. So it's like, French will be okay. But like, what about the languages that only happen here? Like, for example, for me, there's less than 100 fluent speakers of my language left. Exactly what you're doing with your eyes. It's like, for me, that dictates the work that I need to do in my life. Because when I was growing up, I can't just go and turn on the radio or turn on the television and then have access to my language, have access to my culture. Like, I had to go and seek it out. And I had to go to basically live a alternative existence to every other childhood that my friend had, which was just like, go to school and like hang with your family and that's it. But like, also my mom made sure that we were like raised in the culture too, and like knew our language and like all this stuff. So it's like, did
you hear it as growing up then, or did you not hear it, or did you?
Yeah, it was like,
was there too much assimilation at that point, or did you guys actually hear it spoken?
Well, yeah, definitely heard it spoken a lot. Like, for us, because my father is non-Indigenous and my mother is Indigenous, we didn't speak it as first language at home. But when she wanted to talk to us directly, you better believe it came out. And then her, when she talked to her, mom or her family, like, it was always, but it took me a while, like, even as a young person, to understand like what was going on, like that there was another language happening, and that I knew that there was something going on because we would only speak it when we went to go visit that family, or that side of my family. And I was like, But anyway, after a while, I figured it out. And like, and then after, like, when you get to a certain age in our community, because our language is so endangered, you know, there's a lot of rhetoric around like the importance of it, you know? And so I guess I was just indoctrinated and propagated to coming up, but it worked, you know? It made me believe in the value of our language and understand that it's all we have, you know? At the end of the day, it is the only way as an oral culture, right? Okay, so like, two, we must acknowledge that like up until even, okay, so just my language particularly, up until 25 years ago, we didn't have a written system. There was no way of writing our language. So it's a very recent creation. So for example, my mother, who grew up, you know, in the language, speaking the language, didn't know how to write it until 2 years ago. So for us, we're the first generation who kind of have the skills to speak and write, which is cool, but also changes an oral language and it codifies it in a way, but preserves it too. So I don't know, it's like a really interesting moment right now where we're like, we still have lots of fluent speakers, like not lots, but like we have some fluent speakers alive, and they're with us and they want to teach. And it's about, I guess, connecting the young people that want to learn with those people that want to teach. And so I've been really inspired right now. There's a project happening in our territory to build the first Wolastoqey immersion school, which is really exciting and something that we desperately need. And my mom is like, she's kind of taking the charge on that project. So I'm just like, every time I get a chance, I'm just like, I want to talk about it because it's so, for me, it's so fun. And it's like, I had no opportunity like that growing up at all. There was no space for us to go and learn our language. We just had to do it from listening, you know, being at home and listening to the stories or hitting the books real hard. And that's basically what I've been doing for the last, 3 years is because I didn't just want to be able to, you know, say hi and how are you and be able to pray or whatever. You know, it's like, no, I want to be, well, I actually, okay. If we really want to get into it, I don't believe in fluency. I think this is like it's a myth. Even in English, it's like I learn like 3 English words every day, and it's my first language. So how dare I consider myself fluent? You know, fluency is like an unfurling or like a ripening into a language. You know, rather than like an endpoint. So,
yes. Yeah.
Sorry. Anyway, this is getting into like
that makes sense. So here's what I want to talk to you about.
Yeah, what's up?
So we're doing this. It's an anthropology project, really. It's a musicology project. Yeah. You kind of do it, you know, look, you're down a rabbit hole in a way, right? You're very focused. I mean, you're in it. I mean, then you've got to put this record out. And I wish I could pronounce the name of it correctly. I would totally screw it up. So I'm going to let you
Can we go slow and do it together? Is that okay?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay, so the first word.
I want to do it.
Yeah, so the first word is it's talking about the people, right? So remember I was telling you that river, the Wolastoq River, and the people who live on it. So that's Wolastoqey. So that's the first word, Wolastoqey. So that's our people. Wolastoqey. And then the second word, our word, the verb to sing is lintu. So the word for a song is lintuwagen, and the word for songs, plural, is lintuwagen awa. So it's the whole thing is Wolastoqey lintuwagen awa. Wolastoqey lintuwagen awa. Well, look at
Something
that.
like that.
Well done.
So this is what happens. This is the name of the record. It comes out.
Yeah, there you go.
You have many accolades. You win a Polaris Prize up in Canada. You win a Juno Award. Mm-hmm. So now, how does that feel? I mean, it's a solitary thing that you just did. Now it's out in front of all these people. You have to perform it. How did you balance that?
It was totally weird because it went from like being, like you said, like a solitary project and something that was very much personal, you know, in my language, from my community, And then you have to go out and you have to, well, I don't have to, but I did want to. Like, there's a part of me that was like, you know, I want it to be accessible for my people, but also other people need to hear this too. You know, this is like, it's important. It's important that, you know, newcomers to this land know the songs that have been here for a real long time. Because keep in mind too, all the songs that record is based off, you know, those recordings are going back 100 years. But, you know, when you get to read the field notes and all the journals from this anthropologist, you know, he's talking to these people, and the singers before they sing their song, they say, well, my grandmother taught me this song and she learned it from her grandmother, you know? So it's like, think about that. That's like already, that's like extending that by 2 generations. And so these songs are going back, you know, maybe thousands of years, you know? And that is like, in an oral culture, we have to understand that song is not just entertainment. It can't be, right? Song is how we pass on our worldview. It's how we pass on our culture. It's really a form of law as well, right? Because when we don't have written law, our songs tell us how to live. And so I guess for me, I wanted to reignite this sense of song as more than just entertainment, or something as more than just what we listen to, but something that carries our worldview into the future, you know, and for the next generations.
Well, I think you fully accomplished that. So, it's nice to see it acknowledged.
Yeah,
you know, because sometimes that doesn't happen. So,
and the prizes were cool. You know, it's like getting, maybe more so than the prizes or the accolade. It's like the opportunity to go and represent. You know, to be a representation of something bigger than yourself. On a stage that hasn't seen a lot of your people, you know, that hasn't, you know, engaged with our stories in a substantive way. And so for me, just to be able to go onto that stage, and that's why I kind of, sometimes I bring out the ostentatious dress, or sometimes I bring out the capes and all that kind of dramatic flair stuff, just because I think it's like, to have that kind of space to go and to express not just something that's indigenous openly and honestly, but also something that's queer and something that is like in between, and both, right? And that, I think, is like also an important thing to acknowledge, is that like often, you know, with identity politic and like we are separating ourselves out, but it's like we can't do that, because our identities are so intermingled with each other, and there's such an interplay between them, you know? And so I guess, and when I look to my next record too, that's kind of what it's looking at, is that intersection of experience of being both, you know, an LGBTQ person, but also being an indigenous person, and what that means, you know? And there's a quote, I guess, that kind of inspired it. And it says, "The place where 2 discriminations meet is a dangerous place to live." And I thought, when I heard that for the first time, I thought, wow, yeah, that speaks to my experience for sure, you know, because it's like, and yet, you know, there's a lot of hard stuff on that record that's coming, a lot of like painful things, because we're dealing with the history of colonization and of domination and of some really hard stuff. And yet through it exists a resilience and an emergence in beauty. Like the fact that I can still speak language, even after, you know, over 500 years of sort of European assimilation tactics. You know, we're still here, and we still sing, we still speak, we still dance, we still know our ways. And I think that at the end of the day, no matter how hard it is, that is a celebration of the human spirit of resilience. That is not even about, you know, native or non-native or whatever. It's just about like, look at what we did. We survived that. You know, we've been going through this pandemic. Yeah, try the pandemic of colonial violence for the last 500 years. Yeah. So anyway.
So when can we expect this record? I mean, you're deep in it now?
Well, like I literally like 3 days ago, I just got back to the city here in Montreal. I went to Toronto to record it just because, Yeah, I just love making music in that city, and there's a energy, like kind of a frenetic kind of like whoa that happens there that I'm really excited by. So there we did all the kind of like the bed tracks, right, or the foundation of the sounds,
All the
piano,
basic
the
tracks.
drums, the bass, all that stuff. So that's kind of the point where we're at now. Like that's kind of, we captured everything in that front, and then I also like had this wild idea because coming from that sort of classical background too. So there's also going to be an orchestra and a choir on this record. Ambition.
You're going big. You're going big.
We'll see how that goes. But so we gotta like everything's kind of composed for that, but we gotta like record it now. So that's kind of the next step.
Can you do all those orchestration things yourself, or?
I mean, I could. Like that would be like really like going back to my like music school days of like transcription class. But no, I don't want to do that. And I don't choose to do that. And I pay somebody who loves to do that to do that.
There you go.
Yeah. So, of course I have input, and I'm like often like at that table sharing ideas and like, but it's just the speed in which some people can do that work.
Right.
Like, why would I? But it's like, at a certain point you have to, I think there's this idea of the like genius artist, or like the solitary person that can do it all themselves. And that's a really romantic idea, but I think it's kind of bullshit, right? Like, I don't know. I've not met a single artist working at a high level that works that way. We rely on teams and people that help us to realize our visions and what we want to do. So I'm very, very lucky that I'm working with one of my favorite string players and string arrangers up here in Canada, who works with some pretty heavy hitter artists, like was just working on the Arcade Fire record, was a string orchestrator for Buffy St. Marie, which is actually how I got connected to. I was like, who's doing Buffy's strings? I want to use them. So that's how it kind of works. But yeah, he's going to be kind of building that sound world through the orchestra, and I'm really excited. I did and that's sort of how I got onto it, was like last year before the pandemic, I did an orchestral tour for my last record. And we did with orchestras across Canada a presentation of that record. And to sing, there's no other feeling in the world than to sing on top of that like bed of sound that is so broad, like, because it's really capturing every sonic frequency, every like open space of sonic possibility is taken by the lowness of the double bass, or the height of the flute, or the brightness of the trumpet. It's all there, and it's the height of like, whatever. We can sit here and talk about the like weird colonial history of the orchestra and the fact that like, what am I doing bringing my music there? But at the same time, what I want to do is I want to lift up our music into those spaces, and to say that like every music has pedigree, every music has mentorship, every music has that like the work that it takes to get to a certain level. And we need to acknowledge that, because I think for a long time classical music has kind of put a fence around itself and said like, this is art music, like we are creating top tier. And sure, great. You know what? If you want to spend like 8 hours a day practicing the violin, that's cool. But there's like there's other ways of making music that are just as beautiful, just as precious, and go back just as far and have a really strong lineage. So for me, I guess just incorporating orchestra into Indigenous music is about sort of leveling that playing field for the first time and saying that like our melodies are just as beautiful, and if we dress them up in that way, they're going to soar just as far. So I really hope so.
Fantastic. I love it. Well, and the good news is you get to play, acoustically perfect rooms versus, clubs or something. All these parts.
It's like, I've been very fortunate, like this whole time through the process, is to like have access to these kind of spaces that elevate the project and the experience for audience members. To play in these soft seat theaters where people can sit back and witness music, and listen in a deep way, rather than like hearing people talk, grabbing a drink, and this is fine. And I like to go to shows like that too. But just in what I do, I like to have people there to listen to his story. So yeah, I hope
Fantastic.
to keep going in that direction, and we'll see where that takes me. I have no idea. Hopefully to Houston sometime.
We got to get you in the States. Yeah, that's for sure. You need to come down here. We got to figure something out. So
well, I did one really cool gig in the States that I'll never forget, which was NPR Tiny Desk, which was like, I was like, if that's my introduction into playing in the States, I think that's a pretty good way to start. But
I saw that actually. It was great.
There's so much to see though. And I really want to come down and see our relatives down there and just share this music. Cause I think, across Turtle Island, which is what we call North America, Indigenous people are everywhere, in every city and in every town. We are out there, and I think it helps all of us to go out and to meet our neighbors, to get to know who we live beside. And, if we want to take it one step further, whose land we live on. But, I think that's 201. Now we'll stick with the 101. Like, just go meet your neighbors, like go to a powwow, go to a gathering. We want to tell you our stories, and that's a beautiful offering. And the thing is, it's always been that. My elders say it's always been a welcome song the whole time. And I think that is a really beautiful philosophy to remember when engaging in these really difficult conversations about colonialism, about the really tough history of how this land came to be, is that hand has always been extended, even in the face of a lot of really difficult history. That welcome has never gone away. And that's what the extension of why I do what I do is, because it's still that welcome. It's still that come around our fire. Let us show you what we do, because for a long time you've been trying to control the way that we don't want to do that anymore. So you come around our fire, and we'll show you how we do things. So I hope we can be that, and I want to bring the fire. I want to bring the fire down south too. So I hope I can do that someday.
That's awesome. Well, listen, I'm grateful to you. I thank you because, as an anthropologist, as a musicologist, you're extremely talented as a musician and singer. It's just been, man, you're a full package. It's been really great to be introduced to you and to listen to your interpretations, I suppose, of your people.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. It's like I don't know that I'm much of a composer. I feel like an arranger at best. I'm picking up that torch that has been set down for me by those who went before, and now I get to put some contemporary flair to it. Like, what does our music sound? What does our traditional music sound like today? And when we have access to orchestras and recording studios and all the fixins, I love that, and I just hope to keep expanding that and letting other Indigenous people know that that is the pathway, and we don't have to put ourselves aside to enter these spaces. In fact, we're all the better if we bring ourselves to those spaces. So thank you for letting me bring myself to this space.
Truth. I can't wait to see you live. I'm very excited. So, and thank you for doing this, and stay healthy. And I can't wait to hear the new music.
Well, I'll be sure to send it down when it's all ready.
Thank you for listening. This show originates from the podcast capital, Austin, Texas. My producer is Sean O'Neill. Visit theradicalpod.com for updates and even some merchandise. Also, please subscribe at Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And I also ask that you please share episodes with your friends so we can continue to grow our community. See you all again next Friday.